This is a real HR termination case. The names and details have been removed, but the situation happened, and I was involved in reviewing how it should be handled. An employee was caught using their phone and wearing earbuds while they were supposed to be working. Management tried to address it. The employee ignored them and walked away, and eventually, management came to HR saying they wanted to terminate the employee for insubordination. So here's what I want to do. I'm going to walk you through this case the same way I had to look at it from an HR perspective. What management initially reported, the questions I needed answered, what happened next, and ultimately, whether I believe the termination was justified. Because based on only what you've heard so far, I would not have approved the termination. But the situation was nowhere near over. Here's how this starts. An employee is working in a position where they're expected to remain attentive to what's happening around them. A manager observes the employee using their personal cell phone and wearing earbuds in both ears. The manager attempts to address the employee. Instead of stopping and having the conversation, the employee apparently ignores the manager and walks away. Eventually, two members of management approach the employee together and explain that using the phone and earbuds in that manner violates the company policy. At this point, management is frustrated, and I understand why. But here's where HR has to slow down the situation, because management's initial description of this was essentially the employee was insubordinate. And whenever I hear that word, one of my first questions is, what did they actually do? Insubordinate is a conclusion. I need the behavior. Did they refuse a direct instruction? Did they not hear the manager? Did they swear at somebody? Did they walk away? Was the instruction itself reasonable and related to the job? Those distinctions matter. One of the easiest mistakes managers make in documentation is replacing what happened with how the behavior made them feel: disrespectful, bad attitude, hostile, insubordinate. Those words might actually describe ultimately the conduct, but they are not the facts. Tell me what happened, because HR should be making a decision based on objective, observable behavior, not adjectives. At this point in the case, no, not yet. I have an apparent policy violation. I have an employee who apparently ignored management, and I have an allegation that the employee refused to appropriately engage when management tried to address the issue. That's enough for me to investigate. It may be enough to discipline, but I am not at a termination yet. And there's another reason why HR shouldn't immediately jump from refusal to direction to insubordination. You need to understand why the employee refused. There are circumstances where an employee pushing back against management can involve legally protected activity. Employees can have protections when acting together with coworkers regarding pay or working conditions, even in places without a union. The National Labor Relations Board specifically recognizes certain forms of protected concerted activity. OSHA also recognizes limited circumstances where employees may legally refuse work because of an imminent hazard. And the EEOC identifies activities such as discrimination, requesting certain accommodations, and even refusing discriminatory instructions as potentially protected activity. That does not mean an employee can simply yell protected activity every time they don't want to follow instruction. They can't. In fact, the EEOC explicitly explains that engaging in protected EEO activity does not give an employee immunity from legitimate discipline for unrelated misconduct. But it means HR needs to ask the question, what was the instruction and why did the employee refuse it? In our case, this was much simpler. Management was enforcing an existing personal cell phone policy and conduct policy. The employee had previously received the policies. There was documentation showing the employee had acknowledged receiving them. And there was no indication in the information presented to HR that the employee's refusal involved safety or discrimination or any of the sorts. So now, the case is getting stronger. but we're still not done. The employee goes to the manager's office to discuss what happened. Management explains the policy again. They provide employee with copies of the applicable policies and the employee handbook. And importantly, the company has signed acknowledgments showing that these policies had previously been provided to the employee. That's useful documentation, but I want to make a distinction here. A signed handbook acknowledgement does not magically make every termination defensible. What it helps is establish notice. It makes it much harder for the conversation to become, "Nobody ever told me that was a rule." Management concludes the conversation. As the employee is leaving, the manager says something along the lines of "thank you," and the employee responds loudly, "You're not welcome." Now, would I terminate because someone said that? Probably not. Is it professional? No. Is it disrespectful? Sure. But this is exactly where management has to avoid making an emotional decision, because I don't want the termination documentation to become, "This employee was rude to management." That's weak, and what happens next makes the issue almost irrelevant anyway. The employee is instructed to clock out and leave the workplace. At that point, another manager witnesses the employee yelling and swearing at the main manager. The employee is again told they need to leave. Management informs the employee that if they refuse to leave, law enforcement may be contacted. And then the employee takes the handbook that they were given and throws it at their manager. The handbook physically strikes the manager. Additional papers are thrown on the floor, and as the employee moves through the doorway, the manager moves out of the employee's path because of the employee's aggressive behavior. Now the case has become completely different. This is probably the biggest lesson in the entire case. If I approve the termination, I do not want the termination reason to read "violation of cell phone policy." That's where the incident started. That's certainly not where it ended. I also don't want to reduce the entire termination to insubordination. That's too broad. We now have several separate behaviors to evaluate. There was an initial policy violation. There was failure to appropriately respond when management addressed the policy. There was continued disruptive behavior after the employee was removed from duty. There was yelling and profanity directed towards management. There was failure to immediately leave after being instructed to do so. And most significantly at this point, there was physical conduct involving an object being thrown at another person and making contact. That final piece substantially changes my risk analysis. And notice what I'm not saying. I'm not saying they disrespected the manager, so fire them. I'm saying the employee's conduct escalated from relatively routine policy correction into disruptive and physically aggressive workplace behavior witnessed by multiple people. This is a much stronger HR conclusion because I can connect it to specific conduct and evidence. Before I approve the termination, I'm still doing a final check. Even when something looks obvious, first, what does the policy actually say? I want the cell phone policy. I want the standards of conduct. I want any policy covering workplace violence, threatening behavior, you name it. Not because I need 17 different rules that the employee violated, I don't. I'm actually just trying to do the opposite. I want the termination to be as clean as possible, at least the reason. Second, do we have witnesses? In this case, yes. Different members of management witnessed different portions of the incident. That matters because now this isn't simply management says one thing, employee says another. Third, what exactly did the witness observe? Don't give me they were crazy. Don't give me they became hostile. Don't give me they were completely out of control. Give me they raised their voice. They started using profanity. They were instructed to leave. They threw a handbook. The handbook hit management in the chest. The manager moved out of the doorway as the employee approached. Those are facts I can actually evaluate. Now fourth, is there anything else going on that changes the risk? Did this employee recently complain about discrimination? Do they need a combination? Was there a safety concern? Did they report harassment? Did they take protected leave recently? Not because any of those things excuse misconduct. Again, they don't automatically. But if protected activity exists anywhere near a termination decision, HR needs to make sure evidence supports a legitimate reason that is independent of the activity. The EEOC actually recommends an independent evaluation of disciplinary decisions when adverse action follows protected EEO activity. And finally, how have we handled comparable conduct before? Because consistency matters. If one employee gets terminated for threatening behavior, while another employee did substantially the same thing 2 months ago and received a verbal warning, I want to know why. Different facts can justify different outcomes, but HR should be able to explain the difference. There were several things I liked how management handled this. First, once the initial reaction wasn't productive, the manager didn't continue chasing the employee around trying to win an argument. Another leader became involved. Second, management went back to the actual policy. That's so important. Instead of, because I said so, they could establish, this is the rule. Here's the policy, and here's your previous acknowledgement of receiving it. Third, there were witnesses. Especially once an employee becomes visibly upset, having another member of management present protects everyone involved. Fourth, once the behavior escalated, management directed the employee to clock out and leave. At that point, this isn't the time to keep debating the merits of cell phone policy. The conversation is over. The goal became de-escalation and getting everybody separated safely. And fifth, management documented the sequence of events. That gives HR something to evaluate other than, you had to be there. There are also things I would tighten up. The biggest one is documentation language. I would be extremely careful with words like aggressive, hostile, threatening, disrespectful. Those words can be included when appropriate, but I want the behavior underneath them. Instead of employee became aggressive, write employee raised their voice. Use profanity toward the management through the handbook, which struck the management and continued toward the doorway after being directed to leave. Now, the reader can decide whether that behavior was aggressive. You don't have to convince them with the adjective. I would also separate the witness statements as soon as reasonably possible. Don't get 5 people into a room and create one collective story. I want each person documenting what they personally saw and heard. I would preserve any available objective evidence as well. Video, access records, time records, messages, anything. And once the employee has left safely, I would stop the operational team from continuing to argue the case through texts or email. Send the documentation to HR. Let HR review it. Let HR make the decision. Because the more emotionally charged a situation becomes, the more valuable it is to have someone who wasn't standing in the middle of it review the facts. So let's answer the question. Would I support the termination? Yes, and I would be very comfortable explaining why. Not because the employee wore earbuds, or because the employee used their cell phone, or said something disrespectful, and not simply because a manager used the word insubordination. I would support termination because the documented conduct escalated into serious workplace misconduct after multiple management interventions. The employee had notice of the underlying policies. Multiple witnesses could corroborate different portions of what occurred. The employee was given clear instruction to leave. The behavior continued escalating, and ultimately the employee threw an object that physically struck another person. At that point, assuming my policy review, consistency review, and protected activity didn't uncover something materially different, I would recommend termination. And depending on the company's policies, I would not require management to work through several lesser stages of progressive discipline before acting on conduct this serious. Progressive discipline makes sense when we're trying to correct behavior. There's also situations where the behavior itself makes continued employment unreasonable. This is one of those situations for me. Here's what I want managers to take away from this case. HR's job isn't to find a reason to fire somebody, and it isn't to find a reason to say everybody either. Our job is to correctly identify what happened, determine what matters, evaluate the risk, and recommend an outcome that we can actually defend. This case started with earbuds. If you only looked at it for the first 5 minutes, termination would have been difficult for me to support. But HR decisions should change when the facts change. And that's exactly what happened here. A relatively minor policy became a conduct issue. A conduct issue became a workplace disruption. And the workplace disruption escalated into physical behavior toward another employee. That's the termination case. Not they had a bad attitude, not they disrespected their boss, and not management was done with them. The termination decision should be tied to the actual documentation and conduct. Because if I ever have to explain this decision 6 months from now to another HR professional, to an attorney, to an agency, or simply to a leadership asking why we made the decision, I don't want to say, well, everyone felt like the employee was insubordinate. I want to be able to say, here's what happened, here's the evidence, here's the policy, here's why the conduct warranted termination. That's HR. And that's how I handled this one. If you were reviewing this one before knowing how the incident ended, at what point would you have moved from discipline to termination? Well, that's the insight for today. I know this one was a little bit different and more of a story and less of an insight. But I thought it would be beneficial to go over and talk through what an actual HR case looks like. But if you or anyone you know needs practical HR support for your workplace, I'll have my website linked below. I'll see you in the next one.